It was a morning like any other. A poor young girl rushed to school wearing a worn-out backpack and shoes with fraying soles. No one noticed her, no one was waiting for her, and she expected nothing except not to be late for class. But then, for just 1 second, she stopped. A woman collapsed on the sidewalk. A hand reached out. A choice was made, to help or to walk on like everyone else. Amara Collins chose to do the right thing. She had no idea that the woman was the wife of one of the most powerful billionaires in America, and the man witnessing it all was her husband. From one simple act, a door opened, not just changing Amara's future, but touching the heart of a family that stood at the very top of the world. Amara Collins burst out of the rundown apartment like a gust of wind. The early morning sky over Briar Hollow was grey and bitterly cold, the air damp with the metallic scent of rust and last night's uncollected trash. The 16-year-old girl pulled her thin scarf tighter around her neck, feet pounding the cracked sidewalk bricks in a desperate rush. She was late, again, and if she got marked tardy one more time, she could be suspended from her scholarship program. Her mother, Diana Collins, worked 2 jobs a day just to afford the rent on their rust-stained one-bedroom apartment and cover the remaining tuition fees for her daughter. Amara knew she couldn't let that sacrifice go to waste. Her threadbare backpack bounced on her shoulders, stuffed with borrowed library books and a granola bar she planned to eat for lunch. She sprinted past damp streets, a shuttered laundromat, and a ghostly quiet convenience store. Briar Hollow was still half asleep, worn out from another restless night. But as Amara crossed into the edge of the wealthy district, where high-rise glass buildings caught the early light and luxury cars lined the curbs, she stopped in her tracks. Up ahead, on the pristine stone sidewalk of the commercial plaza, a woman was collapsing. She clung desperately to a street lamp, her body swaying like a tree about to fall. One hand clutched her chest, the other reached out, trembling for support. No one stopped. Pedestrians walked past. A few glanced over and looked away. A security guard nearby saw her, but kept walking. Amara hesitated. Her mother's warning echoed in her mind. Don't get involved in the rich part of town. They won't give you a second chance. But her feet moved forward on their own, not because she wanted to be a hero, but because she couldn't pretend not to see. Amara rushed forward, catching the woman just as she collapsed onto the freezing stone pavement. The woman trembled, her breath shallow and uneven, eyes shut tight, forehead dotted with sweat. "Mom, can you hear me?" Amara asked urgently, her voice cracking with worry. The woman didn't respond, only groaned faintly, one hand clutching her chest. She seemed to be trying to say something, but her fragmented breaths turned her words into little more than a whisper. Amara looked around. Surrounding them was a world of utter indifference. A man in a suit passed by, scrolling on his phone, briefly frowning before picking up his pace. A woman in a tailored dress walked faster, clutching her purse tightly as if afraid of being robbed. Farther off, a building security guard stood watching, one hand near his walkie-talkie, his gaze filled with suspicion. No one stopped. No one asked what was happening. Amara shouted, her voice nearly desperate. "Someone please call an ambulance. She can't breathe." No one answered. A few people shook their heads with annoyance and turned away. A toxic fog of cold apathy seemed to hang over the upscale street. Amara bit her lip. She yanked off her backpack and scrambled through it, finally pulling out a small plastic water bottle. Tilting it gently, she helped the woman sip a few drops. The woman drank like someone crossing a desert. Suddenly, hurried footsteps pounded behind her. "Hey, get your hands off her, right now!" Amara turned around. It was the security guard. A tall man, bulging out of his navy uniform shirt, gripped his walkie-talkie like a weapon. And what chilled Amara the most, his eyes weren't on the woman gasping for air, they were on her. I'm helping her, Amara said, trying to keep her voice calm. I said get your hands off her, he barked, stepping closer, voice sharp as a blade. You are not allowed to touch anyone on this property without permission. Amara planted herself between the guard and the woman, arms outstretched like a human shield. She's in trouble. The paramedics aren't here yet. I won't leave her like this. The guard glared at her, stepping closer, hand on his radio. There was no empathy in his eyes, only suspicion and the readiness to assign blame. Amara knew what was coming. She knew what her face looked like to them. Her skin, her tattered clothes, her worn-out backpack. In their eyes, it was more than enough reason to assume the worst. But before the guard could speak again, "Stop!" The voice came from above. It wasn't loud, but it froze everything. The guard halted mid-step. Amara turned and saw a man standing at the top of the marble steps in front of the towering glass building. A grey-tailored suit, eyes cold as steel, a tall, commanding presence wrapped in unmistakable power. Jackson Vanderlyn, founder of Vanderlyn Corporation, the most powerful man in San Francisco, and the husband of the woman lying unconscious in Amara's arms. The world went silent. Jackson descended the steps, slowly, like a storm gathering strength. His gaze locked onto the guard, then shifted to the girl in the tattered backpack, cradling his wife with everything she had. "This girl did nothing wrong," he said, voice steady and low. "She saved my wife." The guard froze. Amara looked up at Jackson. She didn't know who he was. She only saw a man trembling with fear of losing his wife, and silently thanking her with eyes that no words could match. The woman in Amara's arms exhaled shakily, her pale lips murmuring unintelligible words. Amara gently tightened her hold on the woman's hand, eyes darting to Jackson, the man who had appeared like a thunderstorm crashing through silence. No one spoke. A tense stillness cloaked the entire scene. The security guard took a half-step back, sweat beading on his forehead, no longer able to meet the piercing gaze of the man before him. He stammered, I thought the girl was attacking her." Jackson Vanderlyn didn't answer right away. He crouched down, carefully cradling his wife. And in that moment, his anger faded, replaced by sheer terror at seeing the love of his life on the edge of collapse. "Isabel," he whispered, gently brushing her hair back. "I'm here now. It's going to be okay." A staff member in a sharp suit burst out from inside the building, phone pressed to his ear. "I've got emergency services on the line. The ambulance is 3 minutes out." Amara exhaled in relief, sinking to her knees beside the woman, still holding her hand tightly. The woman, now she knew her name was Isabel, murmured something faintly. Jackson leaned in. "She helped me," Isabel whispered through fractured breaths. No one stopped, only the girl. For the first time since arriving, Jackson turned and truly looked at Amara. He saw a skinny teenager with tired eyes, hair tousled by wind and haste, wearing frayed clothes and a battered backpack. And yet, her face radiated a rare kind of courage and sincerity. He spoke slowly but clearly. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Amara hesitated for a second, then replied, Amara Collins." Jackson nodded, repeating her name like he was etching it into memory. Amara Collins, the girl who didn't walk away. Just then, a middle-aged man in a sleek black suit approached, Jackson's personal assistant. "We should get moving, Mr. Vanderlyn. The ambulance is arriving now. I've notified your private doctor and asked the hospital to prepare the VIP emergency suite." Jackson didn't answer him. He turned back to Amara and did something no one expected. He took the girl's hand and held it, his eyes filled with gratitude. "You didn't just save my wife, you saved my whole world." The assistant blinked in disbelief. The security guard dropped his gaze in shame. Around them, the crowd began to murmur. A few pulled out their phones, capturing the surreal scene. a poor teenage girl cradling one of the city's most powerful women, with San Francisco's richest man bowing his head to thank her. Amara's cheeks flushed pink. She didn't know what to say. She simply murmured, I just couldn't walk past her. And then the wail of an ambulance siren pierced the city, echoing between the steel and glass towers. Jackson looked at Amara one last time before the medics arrived. "You'll hear from me very soon." He stayed by Isabel's side as she was lifted onto the stretcher, her hand still clutching his, frail but unwavering. Just before the ambulance doors closed, Isabel turned her head, her eyes locking onto Amara's, silently pouring out a gratitude no words could hold. And then they were gone. Amara stood alone on the cold sidewalk, her knees weak, not from fear, but from the quiet realization that she had just stepped into a moment that would change everything. She didn't know it yet, but from that very second, her life had turned to a brand new chapter. The sound of the ambulance siren had long faded. The crowd had dispersed, leaving the sidewalk quiet, with only Amara Collins still standing there, her heart pounding in her chest. She bent down to pick up her backpack, which had fallen at some point. Her knees were numb from kneeling too long. Her hands still carried the lingering tremble of the woman she'd held when she nearly collapsed. Amara wasn't sure if she was overwhelmed with emotion or simply still unable to believe what had just happened. By the time Amara returned to the tiny apartment in Briar Hollow, the afternoon sun was already casting golden streaks through the cracked window panes. Her mother, Diana Collins, had just come home from her shift, sitting down to a humble dinner of cold rice and boiled eggs. Diana looked up, startled by her daughter's pale face and dirt-stained clothes. "Amara, what happened to you? Were you crying?" Amara shook her head, trying to smile, but her lips quivered slightly. She didn't say anything. She didn't know where to begin. She didn't know if her mother would even believe her, that the wife of a billionaire had nearly collapsed in front of her, and that she, Amara Collins, had been the one to save her, while dozens of well-dressed passers-by had turned away without a second glance. The next morning, as the first light slipped through their crumpled curtains, the phone rang. Amara had barely opened her eyes when her mother answered. Within seconds, Diana turned, stunned. "Sweetheart, it's for you. Someone from a company called Vanderlyn Corporation." Amara shot upright. Sleep vanished instantly. She grabbed the receiver. A composed, professional woman's voice greeted her on the other end. "Good morning, Amara. I'm the executive assistant to Mr. Jackson Vanderlyn. He would like to invite you and your mother to the headquarters of Vanderlyn Corp at 10 a.m. today. He said, we have something to give to the girl who didn't walk away." Amara froze for a moment. She looked at her mother. Diana nodded, her eyes filled with uncertainty, but her instincts telling her something extraordinary was unfolding. At 9:45 a.m., the Collins women stood before the tallest glass tower in San Francisco, the headquarters of Vanderlyn Corp. The lobby security greeted them by name, as though they'd been expected. The receptionist personally escorted them to the VIP elevator. When the doors opened at the very top floor, a long carpeted hallway unfolded before them, elegant, silent, and awe-inspiring. At the end of that hallway, a door opened. Jackson Vanderlyn was standing there. No entourage, no bodyguards, just one man, his eyes weathered by life, and a genuine smile reserved for the girl who chose not to turn away. "Hello, Amara. Hello, Mrs. Collins," he greeted, his voice warmer than expected. "I owe you both. More than I can ever put into words." Diana gently squeezed her daughter's hand. Amara swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't do much. I just couldn't look away." Jackson studied her for a long moment, then smiled. "And sometimes all it takes is one person who doesn't look away. That's enough to change an entire world." He extended his hand and invited them inside. And there, waiting within that office, was something Amara had never dared to dream of. Now standing ready to change her life forever. The executive office on the top floor felt like another world. Glass walls revealed the glittering skyline of San Francisco, bathed in morning light. Every detail was refined, from the muted carpet beneath their feet to the polished walnut desk gleaming in the center of the room. Amara Collins sat beside her mother, her hands resting on her lap to hide their trembling. Diana sat upright as well, her expression composed, trying not to show how out of place she felt, in a place they clearly didn't belong. Across from them, Jackson Vanderlyn stepped forward. He didn't sit right away. He looked at Amara with a reverence, not the gaze of a billionaire bestowing charity, but the look of a husband who almost lost his wife, and was deeply grateful to the young girl who saved the most precious thing in his life. "I meet hundreds of people every week," Jackson began, voice calm, "but no one has made me stop in my tracks like you did yesterday." Amara lowered her head and murmured, I just didn't want her to get hurt." "No," Jackson said firmly, interrupting. "You saved her. The doctors told me if she hadn't had water and someone to support her during the fall, Isabel could have completely lost consciousness. And with her history of severe hypoglycemia, that would have been extremely dangerous." Diana turned toward her daughter, her eyes flickering with emotion. Amara simply pressed her lips together. She had never imagined that something so simple could change anything. But now she was beginning to understand. Sometimes the smallest act could turn an entire world on its axis. Jackson moved behind his desk, opened a drawer and pulled out 2 large envelopes. "I don't believe in solving everything with money, but I do believe in opportunity. And I believe that those who truly deserve it should have a place to step forward." He placed the first envelope in front of Diana. "Ms. Collins, I looked into your employment records. The restaurant where you work hired you just under full-time hours to avoid giving benefits. They've denied you a raise 3 times, despite you never missing a single shift in 2 years." Diana froze, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. But Jackson continued, without judgment. "I think you deserve better." He slid the envelope toward her. "I'd like to offer you a full-time position in Vanderlyn Corp's Logistics Services Division. Stable hours, starting salary 3 times what you currently make, full benefits, and most importantly, a workplace where you're treated with respect." Diana's eyes widened. Her palms trembled slightly as she clutched them together. I don't know what to say." Jackson smiled gently. "Just say yes. We'll walk you through the rest." A quiet moment settled over the room, then Diana nodded, and tears unexpectedly spilled down her cheeks. "Thank you, from the bottom of my heart." Amara watched her mother, her own eyes reddening, but she didn't expect that Jackson wasn't finished. He turned to her now, his tone more serious. "And you, Amara?" He slid the second envelope toward her. "I spoke with your school principal. I'd like to offer you a full scholarship through college. Any field, any accredited university in San Francisco you choose." Amara went still. Jackson leaned slightly closer, his voice softer. "You didn't ask for anything, but you showed me something that people in suits and skyscraper boardrooms often lack: courage, compassion, and integrity. And if you'd like to gain experience, our communications department will always have a space for you." She couldn't speak. Her fingers hovered above the envelope, as if afraid she'd tear a dream just by touching it. Diana turned to her daughter. For the first time in years, she saw Amara cry. But they weren't tears of fear or shame anymore. They were tears of hope. Jackson rose to his feet, his eyes filled with quiet confidence as he looked at both mother and daughter. "Opportunities don't appear on their own. But yesterday you created one. And now I'm just opening that door wider, so you can both walk through. 3 days later, the main lobby of the Vanderlyn Tower was quietly but meticulously prepared. No reporters, no flashy press coverage, just an unannounced staff meeting with an urgent memo. All front desk, security and ground floor management personnel were required to attend. Senior leadership wants to speak directly. That simple notice was enough to make the entire team tense. Whispers flew, theories circulated, but no one expected the reason to be a girl in a worn-out school uniform, and a woman they had once passed without a second glance. Amara Collins and her mother, Diana, stood beside Jackson Vanderlyn in the center of the lobby. He didn't stand on a step. There was no podium. Just a man, the owner of the building, who wanted to look directly into the eyes of those who had ignored what was right. When Chad, the security guard who had shouted at Amara, stepped forward, Jackson's gaze landed squarely on him. Chad froze, his jaw tightened, sweat began to bead along the back of his neck. Jackson didn't shout, he didn't scold, he spoke in a steady, deliberate voice. 3 days ago, a woman collapsed right at the entrance of this building. Not in an alley, not in the shadows. In broad daylight, at the doorstep of what we claim is one of San Francisco's most modern and prestigious towers. He paused. The entire lobby went silent. There were guards, staff, tenants, but no one stopped. No one asked a single question. He turned to Amara. The girl stood quietly, her hands gripping the straps of a brand new backpack, her eyes humble despite being at the center of the room. Except this girl, Amara Collins, not an employee, not a resident, not someone with any obligation to this building. Jackson stepped aside, giving Amara the center position. He looked directly at the security officer who once tried to drag her away like a trespasser. You yelled at her, told her to get her hands off my wife. You said she was a threat. Look now. He pointed to a large screen behind them where a clip from the building's security camera began to play. It showed Amara kneeling beside the unconscious woman, offering water, calling for help, being shouted at, and still refusing to walk away. No one said a word. A few receptionists lowered their eyes. The floor manager shifted uncomfortably. Jackson continued, this time with a sharpness in his tone. She didn't just save my wife, she reminded us that in a city built on status, we've forgotten the most basic thing, humanity. He turned toward Diana, who stood quietly beside her daughter, her eyes rimmed red with emotion. Starting next week, Ms. Collins will officially join our logistics department. I expect no one will need to be reminded to treat others like human beings. The lobby remained hushed. Jackson took a step toward Amara, his gaze proud. And as for this young lady, I want this entire building to know she is someone I trust, someone to whom my family is indebted. He addressed the staff again. We'll be placing a small plaque in the corner of the lobby, not to glorify kindness, but to remind everyone that courage often comes from the smallest among us, in the moments no one sees. That moment, no one dared to look at Amara as an outsider ever again. Chad lowered his head, the lowest of all, and for the first time he stepped forward and uttered the 3 words that should have been spoken long ago. I am sorry. Amara looked at him. She was silent for a few seconds. Then she nodded. Not to forgive, but to close a chapter and step into the next one, finally beginning to unfold. 3 days after the incident that shook the front steps of Vanderlyn Corp., Amara Collins stood silently in front of the tall glass doors of St. Andrew's Private Hospital, her hands clenched tightly around her backpack straps. In her hand was a guest pass. No name, just a short handwritten note. Isabel would like to see you. JV. She didn't know why. All she knew was that the moment she pulled the card from her back pocket and saw the handwriting, she hadn't been able to rest. When she entered the room on the 10th floor, a private suite with windows overlooking the San Francisco skyline, she saw her. Isabel Vanderlyn, still poised, still sitting tall, but her pale complexion and dark circles under her eyes told a different story. "You came," Isabel said softly, nodding gently. Amara stepped forward slowly, stopping at the edge of the rug. She didn't know whether to bow or say thank you. She simply murmured, "I'm really glad you're feeling better." Isabel smiled, not the polished smile of high society, but the genuine smile of a woman who had known fear, and now knew gratitude. "You saved my life, but there's something I haven't told anyone, and I believe I owe you an explanation." Amara remained silent. She looked into Isabel's eyes and saw something she hadn't noticed that day. Exhaustion, not just from physical strain, but the deep weariness of a woman slowly being swallowed by a world that never stops to listen. Isabel raised a hand to her chest, where a small bandage still lingered. "I have a history of arrhythmia, but I didn't tell anyone. Not because I was brave, but because I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" Amara asked gently. "Afraid they'd push me out of meetings, use my health as an excuse to strip me of leadership. You see, in this company, there are people who wait for women like me to fail." Amara looked down at her own hands, the same slender fingers that had clung to Isabel's hand as if holding on to life itself. And now, the woman before her wasn't a billionaire's wife, but a mother, a warrior, admitting her vulnerability to a teenage girl. That day, no one stopped. No one thought I could be someone important. But maybe they wouldn't have cared even if I wasn't. But you didn't see me as someone who belonged or didn't. You just saw a human being who needed help." Isabel paused. Her voice grew quieter. "You reminded me of a lesson we've all forgotten. The lesson of kindness, unconditional, without motive." The air in the room turned warm and still. From her bedside drawer, Isabel retrieved a small navy blue box and placed it in Amara's hands. "Jackson and I talked. Whether you accept this or not, this door will always be open to you." Amara opened the box. Inside was an official employee badge bearing her name, Amara Collins, Special Assistant, Office of the Chairman, Vanderlyn Corp., along with a full scholarship certificate to one of San Francisco's most prestigious private schools. She was speechless. Isabel looked at her with gentle eyes. "I don't need you to become someone extraordinary. I just hope you'll stay exactly as you are. Like you were that day, kneeling on the sidewalk, holding the hand of a stranger." Amara clutched the badge, her chest tightening. Not from fear, but from the realization that for the first time in her life, someone had truly seen her worth. In a place that seemed reserved for power and prestige, today a tiny seed of humanity had been planted. And Amara was its first green shoot. That evening, mother and daughter shared a humble meal, noodles and stir-fried vegetables, but neither of them complained. Something had started to shift. On the fridge, the eviction notice, once a looming threat, had now been crossed out and pinned like a quiet declaration. "We're still here, and we're moving forward." Amara didn't become a hero praised by the world. She didn't win the lottery overnight. But because of one brave moment, because she chose not to turn away, she and her mother were finally given something they once believed was out of reach. A chance, a fair beginning. Some actions are never caught on camera, some heroes are never known by name, and some moments, seemingly small, are the very turning points that change a life forever. Amara didn't ask for a reward. She simply chose not to turn away when she saw someone fall. And that was enough. Enough to open a new door. Enough to make the world, so often cold and indifferent, pause and reflect. If you believe that quiet kindness still has the power to change lives, subscribe to our channel to help us share more stories like this one. Because who knows? You might be the reason someone's life turns around without even realizing it.